Hi guys, in this part inshallah we'll continue to study Mendel's experiment. Previously we studied some concept or keywords. We study what is meant by heredity, and we said that heredity is the study of transferring of trait from parent to offspring. And we study also what is meant by genetics, and we said that genetics is the scientific study of heredity. Genetics is the scientific study of heredity and how the trait can be transferred from a male and a female to the offspring. And also we study what is meant by purebred individual, which is individuals that show clarity or clarifying or pure trait for all generations. And also we study what is meant by the trait, and we said that trait is something related to the physical appearance or the sums that can be transferred from parent to offspring. But today, inshallah, we'll continue with the father of genetics, the scientist Mendel, to study what is genetics, or to make explanations for why we have similarities between parent and offspring. So this one, inshallah, will be the part related to Mendel's experiment. We study, as we said, heredity, what is meant by it. Study genetics. We study purebred. We study what is meant by traits. If you look at this plant is pea plant. So pea plant is the plant that the scientist Mendel studied to show or to clarify or to establish his results to study genetics. So first of all, we have to know what is meant by F1 and F2 offspring. F1 is the first offspring, is the first result or the first product of the male and the female. For example, if we have yellow plant mating or crossing with green plant, the resulted one, like this one for example, the resulted one is called the offspring. So F1 is the first generation and F2 is the second generation offspring. So Mendel crossed the purebred tall plant with purebred short plants. All generations are tall and shortness trait seems to disappear completely. And this is the question needed to be answered. Why we have disappearing of the trait, which is a short plant? For example, again, we have tall pea plant, crossed. This sign is meaning that we have make crossing or make mating between them with short pea plant. The first generation, or all of the first generation F1, all of them is tall pea plant. So the big question now, where is the short pea plant? Where is the shortest? Does it appear or disappear? It disappears completely. So why did it disappears? This one related to the strengths of the trait. We have two traits now. One of them is a tall pea plant, and the other one is short pea plant. Both of them are traits. But the scientists of genetics proved that one of them is a strong trait, and the other one is so weak trait. So the trait which is so strong, it will appear in the first generation by 100%. So the strong trait, the other name of the strong trait is called dominant trait. So dominant is the trait that hide or mask the other trait. The trait which is so strong to be appear in the first generation by 100%. So all of the first generation, actually all of them is strong. All of them is dominant. And the trait which disappear in the first generation is called recessive trait. So the weak trait that disappear completely in the first generation is called recessive. So recessive is the trait that is become hidden or masked by the other trait, by the strong trait. So who can tell me now which one is a strong trait? Is it tall pea plant or short pea plant? If you find that, or you found that all of the first generation is tall pea plant and the shortest trait seems to disappear completely, this means that the tall pea plant is dominant trait and the short pea plant is recessive trait because it disappeared in the first generation by 100%. So look at this one, please. Here is the appearance. We have pure tall plant, pure tall plant. The other one which is equal to it is called purebred, purebred pea plant. And this one is short pea plant and also pure, and also this one is purebred pea plant. So what will happen in the first generation? In the first generation, only the pea plant, which is tall, appear only. So all of the first generation is tall pea plant. This one is tall, this one is tall, this one is tall, this one is tall. So all of the first generation by 100% is tall pea plant. Tall pea plant. This means that the tall pea plant or the pea plant which is tall is dominant trait because it appears in the first generation by 100% and the other one which is short pea plant disappear completely or masked completely. So again, so the first generation is the first result or the first product of them. For example, this is the parent. We have T capital, or pure tall, pure tall, and this one is T small. T small is pure short trait. So all of the first generation is T capital T small, T capital T small. If you have only one capitalized letter, one uppercase letter, this means that the trait is a strong trait, is tall pea plant. So this one is tall and this one also is tall. And the second generation, it becomes three tall pea plant and one only short pea plant. So again, I would understand this one completely. So what is meant by this? Again, if we make mating between tall pea plant with short pea plant, all of the first generation, which is F1, it will be tall pea plant, If we bring this one, which is the offspring of the first generation, it will be considered the parent of the second generation. So again, the offspring of the first generation is the parent of the second generation. So in the second generation, the parent will be tall pea plant with tall pea plant, but the one which is produced from the first generation. So the second generation, F2, it will be 3 tall and 1 only short. This means that the weak trait reappeared again in the second generation. And the strong trait, its percent maybe it will be 3 to 1. 3 to 1 or 75% to 25%. Again, so this means by first generation and second generation, F1 and F2. So when this plant were full grown, Mendel allows them self-pollination. Then F2 it will be 3/4 tall, meaning that we have 75% tall, and only 25% it will be short. So this the second generations resulted from this one. So this is the parent. We have tall, pure tall with pure short. All of the first generation, it will be tall. But in the second generation, it will be 3 tall and only 1 short. 3 tall and only 1 short. So we want to understand what is the symbols mean. Look, please. We have two types of trait, as we said. We have dominant trait. We have dominant trait or strong trait, dominant trait, and we have recessive trait. You have to understand, my friend, that we have any trait is represented by two symbols, two letters. The two letters, if the trait is a strong trait, it will be capital letter. If the trait is weak trait, it will be lowercase or small letter. For example, if we have trait which is dominant, the dominant trait has two possibilities. It may be dominant pure or dominant hybrid. So what is the difference between them? The dominant pure, it will be capital, like T capital, T capital. But the dominant hybrid, it will be T capital and the other one T small. But the recessive trait is always lowercase, T small, T small. According to the letter, we use it or we choose it. It will be, for example, Y small, Y small. It will be X small, X small. According to the letters, we use it. So we have two types of trait now. Strong trait, which is called a dominant trait, and weak trait, which is called recessive trait. So we have two one now, dominant and recessive. The dominant one is symbolized by a strong or by capital letter, and the recessive one, small letter or lowercase letter. The dominant trait, which is a strong trait, has two possibilities. It may be dominant pure or dominant hybrid. If it's dominant pure, it will be T capital, T capital. If it's dominant hybrid, it will be T capital, T small. But the recessive trait is always lowercase, lowercase. It will be T small, Y small, Y small, or X small, according to the letter we use it in our experiment. So again, if we use this one without using any symbols, we'll find that if the parent is, for example, violet and, for example, white, if the first generation, all of them is violet, this means that the purple or the violet one is dominant trait because it appears in the first generation by 100%. If we make after that self-pollination or self-mating for the offspring resulted from the first generation, you will find that the second generation it will be 3/4 violet or purple and only one fourth it will be what? It will be white. This means that if we use it by percent, it will be 75% violet and only 25% it will be recessive, or it will be 3 to 1. 3 dominant to 1 recessive. 3 dominant to 1 recessive. So again, this means that we have so the factor that control each trait exists in pair or exists in pairs. Why it exists in pairs? For example, any trait like yellow pea plant, it symbolized by two factors. It would be, for example, Y capital, or Y capital, Y small. In all cases, in any cases, we have two letters. We have two factors. Why? Because each trait is represented by two factors, by a pair of factors. Because one of them is taken from the female and the other one is taken from the male. So why we have two factors? Why we have pair of factors? This means that we have pairs of factors. One of them is participated by the female parent, or the female parent contributes one factor while the male parent contributes the other factor. One of these factors in pair can mask or hide. So which one can be hidden? The one that can be hidden is the recessive one. But the one that can hide the other one, that can mask the other one, this one is the dominant trait. So in this one we have parent, one of them is green and the other one is yellow. If you found that all of the first generation is green, this means that green is dominant. Green is dominant because it appears in the first generation by 100%. By 100%. And the recessive one, which is yellow, disappears completely. But disappears, this means that it diminishes completely, it vanishes completely, it disappears completely. No, we have traces of it still exist, but it will appear in the second generation. So in the second generation, or F2, we will find that three forces will be green and only one for it will be yellow. So it will be 3 to 1. 3 dominant and 1 recessive. 3 dominant and 1 recessive. This means that the recessive trait reappeared in the second generation by 25%. So again, we said that the factor control the traits. And this factor consists of two alleles, or two alleles. Each factor consists of two alleles. For example, first of all, you have to understand the other name of factor is gene. The other name of factor is gene. Each gene can be represented, can be expressed in the form of alleles. What is meant by alleles? For example, if I say that we have X capital, X small, this one is gene. In general, this one is called gene or called factor. And this factor consists of two alleles. One allele taken from the male and the other one is taken from the female. So one from the male and the other one is from what? Is from the female. So again, so the gene, the other name of it is factor. The factor controls the trait, controlling the appearance or disappearance of traits. Each gene can be expressed in the form of alleles. The allele is the letters. We use it to express the gene itself. Like this one, here is we have two alleles. One of them is B capital and the other one is B small. So we have pair of allele, like this one, W capital, W capital. This one is alleles. We have two alleles here. And the symbols that we have, the two letters that we have, the genetic makeup, the structure of the gene, this called genotype. So genotype is the form of alleles that exist in the gene. The symbols is called the genotype. But the something that we can see it is called the phenotype. So phenotype is the trait that it appeared for us, the external shape that look like for us or appear for us. So we have the genotype and the phenotype, but here focus at the allele. So allele is the letter or the symbol that express the gene itself. So here we have one important question. If you look at this man, you will find that he is bald. So why is balding? And by passing of time in the second generation, you will find that the offspring of him, it will be also bald. Do you know why? Because there is something so important called the gene. So this gene or is transferred from male to offspring. So this one, in the future, he will be bald. Why? Because the gene responsible for balding transferred from male to the offspring. So the gene is controlling the appearance of trait. Gene control the appearance of the trait. The appearance of the trait. So if you have any trait, this means that the gene is present. But if this trait is disappeared completely, why there is no hair here, this means that because the gene responsible for hair is disappeared completely. There is no existence of it. So one story for us is the monkey girl. The monkey girl, she's a girl that its face contain many hair. This one related to the gene responsible for hair is highly concentrated or localized in the hair or the skin. So this means that the gene which is responsible for hair or foregrowing here is present on the face. So the face, all of it will be filled with here, because once we have the gene, the trait appear. But if we have no gene, the trait will disappear completely. So in this one, we have what is the gene. So gene, it is the factors that control traits. Meaning that if the gene is present, exists, this means that the trait appear. The trait appear. But if the gene is disappear or not present, not exist, this means that the trait disappear completely. Disappear completely. So the gene is something so important. Gene is responsible for all the traits that we see in our life, on the people we see, and so on. So gene, it is a factor that controls the trait, like this one. This is gene. The gene is represented by two alleles. It will be R capital, R small. So the something that form, that make the gene is alleles. So again, so alleles is what? Alleles, they are different forms of gene. They are different forms of what? Of gene. For example, G capital, G small. Two allele make one gene. Make one gene. G small, two allele make one gene, and so on. So each bee plant inherit two alleles. Why two alleles? Because one of them is taken from the female and the other one is taken from the male. So why we have two alleles? Because one of them from male and the other one from the male. Female and male. The female produces something called the egg. We can take one allele from it. And the male can produce something called the sperm. And the sperm, we can take only one allele from it. So we have two alleles. This one can make gene for us. So again, let me revise what we studied in the previous one. Study what is meant by a dominant trait, what is meant by recessive trait, first generation, second generation. So we said that in the first generation, if the both of the trait is purebred, meaning a pure trait, this one is tall and this one is short or dwarf. If this one is capitalized, this means that this trait is dominant trait, strong trait. It will mask the other one. It will be the other one. So the other one is small. This means that is recessive trait. So this one is what? Recessive trait. But this one is dominant trait. So can you guess, my friend, the first generation, it will be what? It will be dominant or recessive? No. Yes, it will be all of them dominant traits. All of them will be dominant. But if you focus here, it is not T capital, it's T capital, T small. So this one is called the hybrid. So hybrid trait is a trait that is mixing from dominant one or dominant allele and recessive allele. But in general, if we have only one of them capitalized, one of them is uppercase, this means that the trait is a dominant trait, is a strong trait. So that means that we have enough. That's enough. To have only one allele is capitalized, or one of them is lowercase, and the other one is uppercase. If only one uppercase, this means that the trait is dominant. After that, we make self-pollination or selving for the second generation, meaning that the offspring of the first generation is the parent of the second generation. Again, the offspring of the first generation is the parent of the second generation. This is the female, for example, and this is the male. So we have male and the female crossed with each other. So the second generation, or F2 of the second generation, will be 3 dominant and only 1 recessive. 3 short and only 1 dwarf. 75 dominant and only we have 25 dwarf, or 3 dominant and 1 recessive. So like this one, we have red and white. Look, my friend, all of the first generation is red. Does this mean that red is dominant or recessive? Which one is strong, red or white? Yes, already the answer it will be red because red is dominant trait. Dominant meaning that the trait that can mask, that can hide the other trait, that can destroy the other trait or make the other trait disappear completely. But disappear completely only in the first generation, but in the second generation it will reappear again by 25%, like this one. So this is the same. So what is dominant trait or dominant allele? Allele is only one letter, but the two letters with each other is gene or factor. Again, the one letter only is called alleles, which you can express the gene itself. But if we have the two letters with each other, this means that we have gene. This means that the gene or factor consists of two alleles. Here is we have R capital, and R small, R small. All of the first generation R capital, R small hybrid or dominant hybrid. Dominant hybrid. So dominant masking the effect of the other allele. The other allele, what's its name, is called recessive. Recessive allele of the weak one. Look at this one, my friend. Here is we have two allele. One of them is dominant allele, and this one is recessive allele. Which one can be the other one? If the recessive one is related to short and the dominant one related to tall, so this gene in general, it will be short or tall? Yes, it will be tall because the dominant one can mask or can hide the other one, can inhibit the effect of the other one, so there is no effect of it. So we have two types of alleles now, my friend. We have dominant allele. It is one whose trait always shows up something so strong, so it shows up in the organism when allele is present. But the other one is recessive allele, which it is one whose trait is hidden whenever the dominant allele is present. Once the dominant one is present, so there is no presence, there is no appearance, there is no role, there is no personality for the recessive one. It will disappear completely. So again, here we have some dominant trait and recessive trait. For example, if we talk about the seed shape in pea plant, we have many contrasting traits in pea plant related to seed shape, seed color, bud shape, bud color, flower location, and also plant size. And here is I have some question for you, my friend. If we make mating or crossing between round seed shape with wrinkled seed shape, all of the first generation, it will be round or wrinkled? Yes, it will be round because all of the first generation, it will be dominant. It will be round. But if we focus at the second generation, it will be 3 round and 1 wrinkled. Moving to the other one, seed color, we have yellow and we have green, or yellow and green. If we make crossing between them, all of the first generation, it will be what? Yes, it will be yellow or yellow. This means that the yellow is dominant, so it appears in the first generation by 100%. And in the second generation, only 1 green and 3 yellow, or 75 yellow and only 25 green. If you make also mating or crossing between inflated bud shape and constricted bud shape, all of the first generation will be inflated and the second generation will be 3 inflated, 1 constricted, and so on. If we are talking about the bud color, we have green and yellow. Green, as you say, is dominant and yellow is what is recessive. This means that if you make mating between them, all of the first generation will be green, but in the second generation it will be 3 green and 1 yellow, and so on in the previous one or in the next one. Wishing all of you get benefit and understand well. Goodbye.